Jim, we're playing poker with you, brother. You cannot keep a straight face at all.
I'm pretty pleased, mate. You're holding 6-3 offsuit, mate. You're holding 6-3 offsuit. Push in, all in, mate. Push in, all in. 6-3 offsuit. Got the hair.
Honourable members, the Speaker.
I acknowledge the Ngunnawal and Ngambri peoples who are the traditional custodians of the Canberra area and pay respect to the elders past and present of all Australia's Indigenous peoples. Almighty God, we humbly beseech Thee to vouchsafe Thy blessing upon this Parliament. Direct and prosper our deliberations to the advancement of Thy glory and the true welfare of the people of Australia. Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be Thy name. Thy kingdom come, Thy will be done in earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive them that trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For Thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, for ever and ever. Amen. The Leader of the House.
I move that the House do now adjourn.
Question is that the House do now adjourn. The Manager of Opposition Business.
Speaker, this is extraordinary. What is happening right now is the government have decided that this place has fallen apart so completely that they are dissolving the parliament for the day entirely. There will be no question time today because they don't know who their ministers are. There will be no question time today because they don't know who their Prime Minister is. There will be no question time today because those opposite have stopped governing. Those opposite are obsessed with each other, but not one of their conversations has anything to do with the Australian people. Not one of the conversations that they're having here go outside their jobs. Every conversation that is happening on the government benches today is about their promotion, is about their entitlements and about their sense of entitlement. That's what's going on today. No government in living memory has dissembled so much that they decided the parliament couldn't meet. No government in living memory has said, it's all too hard, we're just going home. No government in living memory has looked at the parliament where technically they have a majority and said, oh no, we'd rather just not be there at all. This is the same day that those opposite used their numbers by a majority of one to protect the person from the High Court who might be in charge of this nation by the end of the day. used a majority of one to protect somebody from the scrutiny of the High Court, someone who might not even be eligible to be a Member of Parliament, and whose vote protected him? His own. And doesn't that sense of entitlement say everything about what the modern Liberal Party has become? The Liberal Party of today, has no interest in anyone but themselves. They have completely fallen apart, collapsed, to the extent now that they don't want to have a parliament at all. You know, normally people, you think one day when you get into this place, one day you might get to be a minister answering questions in question time. There's 7 or 8 of them at the moment thinking this morning. Maybe this afternoon they'll be answering questions at the dispatch box as Prime Minister. And there's about 30 others who've all been promised that they'll be in the front row by the end of the day. But now they discover that the salary packet of those jobs is more important than the accountability of those jobs. Be in no doubt, if there was ever a justification for question time, it's today. Be in no doubt, in the history of this parliament, if there was ever a government that had questions to answer, it's this mob today. If there were ever ministers whose loyalty was to be questioned, it's today, because remember, the only reason they could be in the position they're in now is if ministers opposite misled this place yesterday. Because if they were telling the truth yesterday, I don't see how they're in the spill territory as a government today. It does not add up. It does not add up. For those opposite, have a think about what you have all become. Have a think about it. Have a think about that moment when you might have thought, if I came to Parliament I would achieve X, Y or Z. Because now those opposite are about to vote that they'd rather not have a parliament at all. That's the question that's being asked. We're not about to ask a question about a particular policy decision. We're about to resolve in this House whether the parliament should be sitting at all. At all. Now, if they wanted to adjourn the House for their party room meeting and suspend it, we would have allowed that. We would have agreed to that, and we were ready to agree to that. But instead of them deciding they'll just suspend for their party room, they're terrified that they have no idea what state they'll be in after their party room. They have no idea what this country will look like in an hour's time. But there's one group of people that aren't being consulted at the moment, and they're called the voters. Of all the consultation that's going on, none of them are consulting the voters. The People's House is here and they should be accountable today.
The Manager of Opposition Business time has concluded. The question is that the House do now adjourn, and I call the Leader of the Opposition.
What I say today is not addressed to the government because Australia no longer has a functioning government. What I say today is not addressed to the Coalition or the Liberal Party because they have no leader of the Liberal Party. The Liberal Party, whatever it does today and tomorrow, is irreparably split. What we have seen in the last few days is we see a government and a Liberal Party who know that they need to focus on the needs of the people, but they just cannot help themselves. Now, no one in this parliament in the last decade can hold their head high about bitterness and argument, but what I recognise is that Labor has learnt its lesson over the last 5 years, but now the government is proposing to adjourn the parliament. To adjourn the parliament would imply somehow that the parliament does not have pressing matters before it. It most certainly does. To adjourn the parliament would be an admission that parliament has failed. It is not the parliament that has failed. It is the Turnbull Liberal government in this country which has failed. The country doesn't need a different Liberal leader. It needs a different government in the country. The government may adjourn the parliament, but they cannot outrun the weight of failure of this government. But the people of Australia must be watching and wondering. Surely, in the bubble which passes for the current government MPs, obsessed as they are with their hatreds and their disagreements, surely they can hear how appalled Australians are. Surely members of this parliament who currently compose the government must be hearing from emails and phone calls, must be talking to people out in their constituencies who say, what on earth are you doing? Now, today we've said to the government that we wouldn't call divisions whilst their party room met if their party room meets. We've been prepared to offer flexibility to the government, but to simply adjourn the parliament is the final admission. I said on Tuesday that this is a government which had lost the will to live. But I don't even think on Tuesday we could have seen the cannibalistic behaviour of a government who's eating itself alive. There is no doubt in my mind that the people of Australia think that the system is broken. Now, what will happen if the parliament adjourns is business will still going on being business, the workers will still go to work. But the job of government is to uplift the nation's vision. This nation has serious issues which it must address. The job of government is to outline the future. The people of Australia, those who voted for the government and those who didn't, consent to the outcome of elections because they believe that the party who forms the government will keep on governing. There are issues in this country which everyday Australians expect the government to answer, and the government, not only is it paralysed by infighting, it is now not even going to bother have the parliament meeting at all. This is the ultimate admission of surrender, of a bankrupt government, of a failed government. The people in Australia want to see proper wages policy, but we don't get that from the government. The people in Australia want a resolution to rising energy prices, and they are not getting this from the government. The people in Australia want an end to the decline of apprenticeships in this country. The people in Australia want to see properly funded childcare. The people in Australia want to see the pensioners get a better deal. The people in Australia want to see our schools properly funded. I hear a few government members interjecting. You've lost the right to interject when you don't even want to be in the parliament. We will take your interjections all day. We just wish you would turn up to work. What a bunch of no-hopers. When they've actually putting up a resolution, they don't want to go to work. The work of the parliament is in the chamber, not in the meetings behind closed doors as you allocate jobs. If I was the National Party, I would be very disappointed in their senior coalition partner. But what we see is, and talk about the farmers in the drought. Are we going to talk about the drought today affecting Australians? I don't think so, because you're adjourning the parliament. Are we going to talk about the congestion in our big cities and the need to have more public transport and more roads funding? I don't think so. Are we going to talk about properly funding our health system and our hospitals? I don't think so. This parliament should not adjourn. If anyone needs to depart from this place, it is not the parliament, it is this government of Australia who has lost the confidence not just of its own backbench, not just of the opposition. You've lost the confidence of everyday Australians. Shame on you.
The question is that the House do now adjourn, and I call the Deputy Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, those opposite, they're not Conservatives, they are vandals. The proposition that we would close down the Parliament of Australia because they can't organise themselves to work out who the Prime Minister is going to be, it's a shock to the people of Australia, who deserve so much better. And here we have the Nationals actually caucusing on the floor of the parliament, trying to work out what they're going to do. What are you going to do? Are you going to support the suspension of the parliament, or do you support democracy? Do you support this parliament doing its job, governing for all Australians? Mr Speaker, Australians are working hard today. They're working in their mines and on the farms and in the factories and in the shops. They're working in their offices, they're teaching our children and nursing our sick. They're at work doing their job. The least they can expect from their government is that the government would turn up to do its job, to focus on what matters. More jobs with decent pay and conditions, dealing with the blowouts in hospital waiting times and hospital waiting lists, making sure that every child gets a great education, that our young Australians can go to TAFE or university, that we're dealing with the drought, that we're considering our place in the world. What are they doing? They're considering who sits on the front bench. That's all they're doing. Opposite, after 5 years, we have a government that can only focus on itself, consumed by chaos and dysfunction and ego. Not one of the three people that we've heard touted as Prime Minister deserves the job. We have one with no authority. That's the member for Wentworth, no authority. We've got one with no legitimacy. That's the member for Dixon. We're not even sure that he's eligible to sit in this parliament. And we've got one with no decency. The member for Cook has never had the courage to nail his colours to the mast. Is he a Conservative? Is he a moderate? Where does he stand on all this division? He is like a hyena circling around the corpse of the modern Liberal Party, waiting for his chance to come up the middle. And the Foreign Minister, well, she used to be discussed as a potential future leader. She doesn't even have the courage to stand. Doesn't even have the courage to stand. Mr Speaker, these Conservatives, imagine what Sir Robert Menzies would think of this mob opposite. In 1942, Sir Robert Menzies delivered his forgotten Australian speech. His forgotten people's speech. What would Sir Robert Menzies think of a house divided? Because he would have been the first to say that a house divided cannot stand. It's like the Montagues and the Capulets. It's like the Hatfields and the McCoys. This is a generational break in the modern Liberal Party because the Conservatives will never let the moderates govern, and the moderates will never let the Conservatives govern. How will they ever bridge this divide? You know, in 1942, that forgotten people's speech, many say Sir Robert Menzies credited with being the father of the modern Liberal Party, today is the funeral of the modern Liberal Party. We are witnessing history being made today because this House divided cannot stand. And given that we know that this House divided cannot stand, the only solution is for whoever the Prime Minister is right now to drive out to the Governor-General and to let the people of Australia decide. Let the people of Australia decide whether they want a government focused only on itself, only on their own jobs, or whether they want a government that is focused on more jobs with decent pay and conditions, on an education system that gives every child the best start in life and the greatest opportunities, on a health system that cares for our most vulnerable with proper funding for our hospitals and our GPs. If they want a government that can solve the problems of our energy policy with lower prices and lower pollution. Mr Speaker, the only solution is not closing down parliament today, but for whoever the Prime Minister is to drive out to the Governor-General and let the Australian people decide. Let the Australian people decide.
The question is that the House do now adjourn. The Leader of the House.
I move the question be put.
The Leader of the House has moved the question be put. All those of that opinion say aye. To the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. Division required. Ring the bells for 4 minutes. Lock the doors. Order. The question is that the motion be put. The ayes will pass to the right of the chair, the noes to the left. I appoint the honourable members for Capricornia and Grey tell us for the ayes, and the honourable members for Lawler and Morton tell us for the noes. Order. The result of the division is ayes 70, noes 68. The question is therefore resolved in the affirmative. The question now is that the House do now adjourn. All those of that opinion say aye. Aye. The contrary, no. No. I think the ayes have it. Division required. Ring the bells for 1 minute. I appoint the same tellers as the previous division, It would be helpful if members could remain in their seats during this successive division, unless they're leaving the chamber or did not vote in the previous division, or they're changing their votes, in which case report to the tellers. Lock the doors. The question is that the House do now adjourn. Members must remain in their seats unless they're changing their vote or did not vote in the previous division, in which case they must report to the tellers. Order. Order. The result of the division is ayes 70, noes 68. The question is therefore resolved in the affirmative. The House stands adjourned until Monday, 10 September 2018 at 10 a.m.